Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate vision into frontline operations. Today on the show is a very well-dressed man. Peyton, thank you very much for being on the show.
Wow, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
I feel underdressed with my Embrace the Ox t-shirt and ball
Hey,
cap.
that's all right.
You've got
That's all
a
right.
nice jacket and even a hanky in there, or mouchoir in your breast pocket. Peyton, can you give us your full name? Tell us who you are, what do you do for a living?
My name's Peyton Jenkins. I am the co-founder and president of Alton Lane, a men's lifestyle brand based here in Richmond, Virginia.
Fabulous. Thank you. Peyton, what is the title of the show? I love it. In the pre-show, we talked about it. I just fell in love with it. Usually I have a hard time. I have to coax it out of my guests, but you just came straight out of the gates. Got it. So what is it?
Yeah. Why suffer? It should be a title that everybody loves, right? It's ironically positive, even though out of the gates it may sound like, yeah. Yeah, so for me, there's this glorified view of what a startup is and what it isn't, what an entrepreneur is and isn't. And I'm just a firm believer that unless there is tension, unless there's some degree of abrasiveness in what you're doing, you're not learning and you're not growing. And it's actually in those moments that if you can embrace it, you actually learn the most. That's been my experience, at least.
I agree. I agree to that. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much to unpack there. So we'll go through that in the show. So Peyton, can you, to give the listeners and the people who are watching context, can you tell us where are you from? How were you, raised, and your journey
Yeah.
to where you are today, please?
Yeah, I'll give you the 411 on me. I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and I have two older brothers. I'm a youngest of three, and I went to college at University of Virginia, 60 miles away, and had a great upbringing. But it was all within the context of Virginia, and really wanted to see the world. And I had an opportunity to teach abroad my first year out of college, and I jumped at it. And it's pretty funny because they hired me to actually teach basically their equivalent of AP economics. And I was unaware that it was based largely on British monetary and fiscal policy. And when I got there and saw the book, I literally was like, oh my gosh, I can't teach this. And so I had a very uncomfortable conversation with the head of the school. And he was very kind to shift me into teaching actually two other loves of mine, history and theology. And I do think I've always had this desire to kind of just jump into things, to understand how to build things. My grandfather was an electrician, self-taught, and I loved figuring out how to do stuff with him. I think that's where that love was probably fostered and where it really burned, and into ultimately, manifesting into starting a company with one of my best friends from college. And but it was a great experience, and it kind of scratched this itch of, okay, let's see something different, and put myself in a very uncomfortable position. And I do remember thinking a week in, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive here? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know a single person in this country. And, it's in those moments where anybody can say, yeah, but you're learning now and you're growing, and you're like, whatever, you're not, I was 22, not listening. But it was probably, I left for England as a very immature, 22-year-old. And I came back, certainly not as a perfectly functioning adult, but I came back as a different person for sure. And most of my family was in some type of real estate. And so that's what I did. I jumped in, wanted to kind of move up corporate ladder, and couple of years later, in the middle of the recession, one of my best friends was a consultant and just had all these different ideas for businesses, and
Hmm.
some were fun, some were interesting. And then this idea of Alton Lane came out, and I'm like, boom, that's perfect. I'm like body type of somewhere between like a jockey and Gandalf. And yeah, that hopefully that gives a good picture for your listeners. And this whole idea of let's create a brand for the every guy, right? So whether you were short, tall, out of shape, in shape, you loved clothing, you hated clothing, we just wanted to be a place where you could be comfortable. And so
Hmm.
that's really was the origin, and that's where we started. And along the way, I met my now wife of 12 years, and she's amazing. I actually met her on an airplane in college. We were reconnected years later in DC, and now we have three boys, 9, 6, and almost 2. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
She's a busy lady. She's got 4 boys at home. Oh my goodness
She
gracious, right?
is. Yeah, she has 4 boys for sure. Yeah, and I'm actually a multiplier effect, so I think she feels like she has like 9 boys. Yeah, I'm like a
uh
3x.
I know. I always say so. When I turned 50 last year, and I went from 40 teen to 50 teen, and
There you
that's
go.
just
I
kind of like,
appreciate that.
yeah, you know what? I'm 50 years old, but I still think like a 15-year-old boy. And it's just, burps and farts still
Yeah,
make me laugh. So it's
yeah.
just
No, it's great. So somebody told me that the way that uh, that men or that kind of the male maturity cycle works is that the moment in which those jokes start to become unfunny, you have kids, and then it completes the cycle, and then they continue to be funny for the rest of your life. And I was like, yeah,
I
it's
know,
pretty
right?
accurate.
It's
Yeah.
it's hilarious. There's so many things to unpack in your journey. I think the first time is, I was in the military and I traveled a lot. And one time that I traveled by myself, the very first time was in Japan. So I had been practicing martial arts for a very long time, and I've learned
Oh,
a couple
cool.
of things. And there's this little card in a noodle that was a wood block painting of Enoshima Island. And I didn't know it was Enoshima Island. So we traveled there to Japan. I was all by myself. I spoke very little Japanese back then. My reading was also very, sporadic. I got to
Sure.
I went and so started working, and they said, "Hey, listen, you got to go to this place. It's called Enoshima Island." I didn't know where it
Hmm.
was. Take the train, go there for the first weekend, and I go through the entire island. There's cats and fishing village, and it's just a wonderful little island. And at the end, there's all
So
these gift
cool.
shops, and there's this massive print of the little card that I've kept since I was about 9 years old. I
No
was in
way.
tears. I was like,
Oh, I bet.
this is it. Like this is where I've been wanting to be for the longest time. And I feel that
Wow.
when you travel, you go through this kind of time portal. When you come back, when you left and you came back to Virginia, isn't it funny how you feel? And I'm at Virginia, wherever you're
Totally.
from originally, and you go
Yeah.
away and you come back and you go, oh, shit. Like you guys have not like this is the next day. Like I left, let's say on
Yeah.
January 6th, 1997. I come back on January 7th, 1998. And you guys are just like one day apart. It's funny how
Yeah.
your brain and your time, I guess your concept of maturity and what you've seen just it's so different, right? It's just
For
completely
sure.
different.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story from my time in England. We had upper six, is the British form of 12th grade, and
Hmm.
as a history teacher, I ended up getting to teach a basically an elective for the upper six called Reality of Warfare Through Film, and I based it on the Band of Brothers miniseries, of course, directed and by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg,
Hmm.
based on the book, which was amazing. And it was just really interesting because the school that I taught at on the outer face of the library. They had structurally made it sound, but they decided that it was hit during the Blitzkrieg in World War II.
Mm.
And as you walked to class every day, you could see the shrapnel still sticking out of the building. And they
Oh,
decided that
wow.
let's keep it like this forever. It's a sign of where we can go as a society. And for me, as like a history buff and having, no obviously no physical impact of war on
Hmm.
within our country during World War I or two, it was like, I mean, it was very sobering for me. Yet the students, like, no big deal, right?
Hmm.
Like, don't even think about it. And so
Yeah, yeah.
this class was actually the first time that they were looking at a lot of these moments of World War II, and we had a German kid in our class, and I knew it would be a little challenging. And anyway, that February, we took all of the upper six history students to Poland in the middle of the winter, and it was awesome. First couple days, we were all around Krakow, beautiful city, but then we
Hmm.
finished our trip going to Auschwitz and Birkenau, and there were three of us teachers, and these kids were all 18. They could drink, they could do whatever they
Hmm.
wanted. They were pressing their limits as 18-year-olds do. And when we were heading to Auschwitz and Birkenau, we're like, should we tell them to be respectful? And the head of the program's like, no, like let's see what the physical place
Oh, that's
does.
good.
And it was amazing, man. I mean, it just like no one spoke a word. Everyone cried at multiple points. You could tell that the young man from Germany was kind of processing a lot, right?
Hmm.
It had nothing to do with him, right? But it's his history, um, and I will never forget our tour guide was a grandson of a survivor, um, and I'll never forget. This was a moment where I definitely grew up a bit. That Auschwitz is awful, and then you get to Birkenau like a mile away, and that's where the famous pictures of the train station that ends at the log barn.
Mm.
That's Birkenau. And they found all these diaries when they got liberated, and the diaries didn't. The most common prayer diary was not praying for liberation, but praying that they would get transferred to Birkenau, or they would be transferred from Birkenau to Auschwitz, so at least they had a chance of survival. And it was this like incredibly sobering moment of like, wait, that was their deepest prayer in that moment, and how warped the world was. And then you look at, and at the time you're like, whoa, this is only 60 years later. At the time it was exactly 60
Yeah,
years
yeah,
later. And um yeah, that does something to you, and you come back and you try to explain that experience to people, and you can, but it's nothing about, there's nothing like feeling it, right? Same with you as that moment in Japan. Like you can never replicate to somebody else what it felt like when you saw that.
Absolutely. I mean, when I got back from my tours, PTSD when I got out of the military wasn't a thing, and it was more like
Sure.
kind of suck it up, Buttercup, right? And
Yeah.
to do little things. I mean, the biggest thing for me was in Bosnia, where I had to dig 4 foot graves for kids,
Oh my
14
gosh.
14 graves of kids. Yeah, so it was pretty.
Wow.
I can actually talk about it without imploding nowadays. I'm
Right.
giggling about it now, and it was pretty nasty. And you come
Oh, I
back,
bet.
and my kids were not happy with the color of the Barbie that they got for Christmas, and that just kind of threw me off for a loop. And you're like, it's
For
not my
sure.
kid's fault. It's not nobody's fault. And I think it
For
it,
sure.
it brings it kind of to the title of the show, which is I think is a good it's a good kind of circle and trampoline to
Yeah.
get or springboard to get into the conversation of why do you need to suffer, right?
Yeah.
Why suffer? So tell us, why did you pick that, like straight off the bat? You fell so why are you in love with that title?
Couple reasons. Uh, I think first and foremost, I was raised in a Christian home of very deep faith, and throughout my life, I have had a worldview where my personal worldview is that suffering is not a blockade to progress or a blockade to the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate goal. It's actually part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually where we can learn the most. And throughout I had a very privileged, easy first 18 years of my life and no real problems. And in college, I knew started to feel something was off. It was almost like something just I couldn't even explain it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I that was my march down into um, kind of really deep depression and mental health issues. And I had no idea what was going on. So, I blocked it forever.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't tell a soul for the better part of 7 years. Every day felt like, let's put on a facade. And that putting on that facade, like with PTSD, it just slowly erodes you, right? It just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's dramatic, but then it's a little bit every day. And you can't point to that moment
Mm-hmm.
that you stopped becoming yourself. And I think the only hope that got me through that era was there is a purpose in this suffering that even though I can't see, I can hold to a hope that it is there. And, the whole analogy that if I wear glasses, if your glasses are covered in mud, just because you can't see what's in front of you, doesn't mean it's not there. And yeah, it took a lot longer than I ever hoped for, but to see it. But after about 7 years of not telling anyone, I had my middle brother was like, I had the weirdest experience today. I was at lunch with a colleague, and out of nowhere, he starts talking about um, his mental health struggles and about this woman, Susan Feaster, that is his psychologist that changed his life. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. And I had looked for people, had no luck, to help me. And so I called this woman, and I still work with her. Here I am almost 20 years later, I guess. Um, and it was that moment where I started to feel like I started to get my life back. And over the
Mm-hmm.
past now 15 plus years, I see that some of those biggest lessons that I needed in life were learned there, even when I didn't realize I was. And
Mm-hmm.
especially within a startup, this startup in many ways has exceeded my expectations. In so many ways, it's not what I imagined. I think that's probably the typical path of a startup. And
Yeah.
um, I would have, I think I would have crumbled in this venture, had it not been for that era and what I learned. And I mean, I definitely would have. I wouldn't have been able to get through the last 13 years professionally and personally. And so, without significant change. And so, why suffer? It's I hate to say it, but it's where, or I don't hate to say it, but it it is literally where I've learned the most important, skills, and where I've been refined the most.
The I think we attach a lot of intensity with the term suffer. We say it's not discomfort, it's suffering, but suffering in the right amount gives you tools, gives you stamina, gives you the calluses that you
For
need
sure.
to be able to move on. It's funny you should say that because earlier on last week I posted my daughter made the provincial or state rugby team age 14, and I
Congratulations.
posted. Thank you. Hey, I was just a coach. I'm just the one that facilitated the journey. Uh, but I said, hard work pays off. She didn't get chosen because she's a top try scorer. She didn't get chosen because she kicks the amount of goals. She got chosen because she puts in hard yards. She makes the hard
It's
tackles,
awesome.
always communicating. And for me, the biggest thing was that my kid at practice, I always say, hey, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that hard work
Yeah,
is through
good for you.
suffering. When we do shuttle runs, I see that she's struggling, but she keeps on ticking. And that's what I teach all of my kids, regardless if they're my kids or not my kids. It's what I teach all my kids. Hey, don't give up. I don't care if you're the last person, if you're the biggest person and you're struggling, and all the fast kids are running fast and you're just a monster of a person. There's a place for you in
Totally.
rugby. Just keep going. Just don't quit, right?
That's
And I
right.
think that's we've created this velvet kind of environment where comfort is everything. And I mean, you got 3
100%.
boys. I got 4 kids, and every
Wow.
day I'm like,
Oh,
am I too soft on them? And I don't want to sound like a nasty dad, but am
yeah, I get it.
I grew up poor. Like I always said to my kids, like we grew up poor, POO. Like we couldn't afford the R at the end of poor. So that's what I say. I
That's
giggle about it,
amazing.
but so I'm always challenging myself. Am I putting just the right amount of suffer in a
Huh.
safe environment for them to understand that failure sucks, losing
Yeah.
sucks. How will you deal with it? Right?
Right.
And I think that what you're saying is absolutely beautiful. Too many young people want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be the CEO. They don't realize that when you're a startup, you're a chief everything officer. You want the big
Totally.
title, wear the pants that go with it, right?
Totally.
And so
100%.
too many people think, I can do this startup. I can do this. Dude, dudette. I don't want to take away anything. You might be the smartest kid around the block.
Yeah.
You might have the greatest ideas. Life experience. Do you have the scars? Do you have the framework, the support internally to deal with the hardship and the shitstorm that you're going to get into?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's the, um, how do you respond when everything turns upside down, right? And it's your first time in it. Is it flight or fight? And I think it's really hard to know exactly how to coach that or develop it. I think so much of it is
Mm-hmm.
probably is genetic related, but I think that I look back and I'm like, all right, well, I never gave in. Shame on me for waiting so long to talk to people, but again,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not that I grew up in the Middle Ages, but in 2001, nobody, especially men, weren't talking about mental
Oh,
health,
hell no.
and
Suck it up, kid.
so
Right?
yeah, 100%. And so, here I was, a kid from a, fine, pretty easy background at the University of Virginia, like,
Rich
give me a
kid.
break. How
Yeah.
like, yeah, like
Yeah.
how rough is life, right?
Yeah.
And so shame on me for not mentioning it for so long because it made it a lot worse. Um, but there was a plan in that. I hold to that. Um, but what did my parents do to help develop that sense of okay, I'm not going to give in, I'm not going to give up, and that's what I think a lot about with my kids as well, because you talk about a velvet rope. I think it's perfect, right? Like we are. I love to coach all of my kids' sports, like all that I can, and I have a deep love for soccer, and so there's this. You talk about velvet rope. It's like every kid comes to practice sometimes in a velvet rope, and it's all right. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want kids being made fun of. You don't want kids being the butt of jokes. Yet you do want those battle scars, right? And you want them age appropriate, but that's where you learn. And I think that if the only if your if your dominating worldview for yourself or for your children is that um, suffering will hurt them and or suffering will inhibit them from their goals, you're setting yourself or your kids up for ultimate failure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And I think we're doing that too much. And I actually see that a lot. People talk about, gosh, hiring is so hard, and it is for sure. I think some industries more than others. And you say the chief everything officer, and like 100%, right? And I think that a lot of people come in thinking, oh, cool, this is a startup. I'm going to get like pretty cool, amenities. I'm going to get a cool office. I'm going to get a cool computer. And then it's like, hey, we screwed up on this order and I need like 60 buttons sewn on to these garments ASAP. And you're like, what? I'm not going to sew a button.
Here's a thimble. Here's a thimble.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, I am, and I don't know how to sew. And that was actually a real experience.
That's what I was going to say.
From like
that story is rooted in reality. That is for sure.
Yeah. I had, and I think where the rubber has met the road and kind of those moments for me the most is, there's two, I guess the opposite ends of the spectrum on that, like wanting to be in a startup or being a CEO, being a founder is like on one hand being like, no, like I can't do that. Like I am, I have better skills. And then the other side is like, I'm not going to go down to that level. Like I don't need to be there. Like I am up here and, you don't understand. I'm the founder, I'm a CEO. And, I worked in our store the first couple of years. We had our first store, as a tangent, was a 600 square foot studio on the 12th floor of 1133 Broadway. It was not a store; it was a studio. It was a room, and there was this. Those like big cities. The big buildings have like tiny little atriums basically in the middle, and there was curtains like this in of the room across, and every now and again we'd be like measuring a customer and we'd see somebody in the curtains like staring at us. And I'll never forget that, because I'm like, only in New York would this happen. And like he would then like try to like introduce himself in the hallway, and I'm like, dude, I know those eyes. I've been seeing them in the freaking curtains for months. I'm sorry, I'm out. But then our next door, we moved and we had a bigger space kind of on a little bit further down the street. And, first 3 or 4 years, my co-founder and I took really all of our appointments. And there was this guy that walked in. I'll never forget his name, though I won't share it. And he's definitely younger than me. And probably at that point, he was probably 6 years younger than me. He was a young lawyer or investment banker. And he came out with his suit on. And I remember thinking like, I literally remembered it was a light gray suit, and I was thinking, that looks pretty good. It's a little fitted, but it looks pretty good. And I was like, hey man, how do you like it? And he got so furious, and he like took it off, and he's like, hey man, like who are you talking to like that? And he threw the suit at me, and said something along the lines of like, I don't need to deal with people like you. And, and I remember at that moment, you feel this I call it a justification pain. Yeah, you feel this this thing in your chest where like I am justified to say whatever wants to come out of my mouth, and I somehow in that moment I actually held back, but it's led to like the biggest lesson for me is that if you have all this, like I have this like suffering that I've gone through, right? That if I'm not careful, I want to make that suffering about me, and I want to be able to like share that so that I can be so that my suffering can be justified. Then you get to these moments like this with these type of customers or vendors, clients, et cetera. And then you're like, you feel so justified then to like bite back. And yeah, it's been this kind of 2-part lesson for me that, suffering I've gone through either personally, corporately, professionally. It's not about me. It is about the work in me. And then when I feel that like justification pain, in the chest, it's been the lesson of I like never respond to anything out of emotion, and made so many mistakes there. And over the period of COVID, I had this moment where I literally went back and I tried to think of all the moments where like I felt that, right? Like I felt so justified. And I couldn't think of a single one where the next day I was like, yeah, I made the right decision in saying that, to that individual.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you don't. And so it's been this like, I don't know, this, like, I feel like if you allow suffering to shape you and you see it for something that is positive, I think it opens up this like willingness to, I don't know, like force to I think most entrepreneurs or CEOs are probably not considered like naturally humble, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a part of them that wants to go get it, right? That wants to get to that next level. And I think it forces you to humble yourself and allow kind of to allow see like not only your faults, but when you do that, I think the lessons of suffering can then flood in, and so kind of bringing it full circle, like I don't, you talk about the velvet rope and the kids, like I actively don't want my kids to suffer, even though I know it's been the best thing for me. Yet part of my job is to protect them, but then part of my job is also to make sure they're ready for the real world, and my 9-year old
Absolutely.
has 9 more years, until he's on his own. And so, yeah, there's no perfect handbook for it.
And that's the key thing is like leadership, like parenting, like safety, never sleeps. You can't say, oh, here's, people ask me all the time, hey, Martin, what's your secret for leadership? I said, constant listening and curiosity. What?
Hmm.
Like, what's
Yeah, I
the,
love that.
no, well, okay, 4 cardinal rules of leadership. You need to provide direction, facilitation, elevation, and celebration. Okay, well, how do you do that? Well, by being curious and finding out what's the right direction
Yeah,
for this, right? There's too many people that think that you can just become this or you can just become that. It's through growth and experience, and it's the same thing. I'm not saying feed your kids, quarter ounce of poison every day so that they're immunized to
yeah,
poison when they're an adult. That's
yeah,
not the point. But you have to let the kid. And this I find is so different from my wife and me, and I think it's a father and mother kind of thing, where fathers tend to be a little bit more risk taker. And I go in the pool
yeah,
and the kids are playing around, and my wife Tracy's always watching. And I say, so hey, listen, instead of turning your back continuously, why don't you sit like me, drink your beer, and watch the kids this way, right? He's like, you're
yeah,
not watching, you're drinking
yeah,
beer. I said, I know exactly where Gavin is. I know exactly where Ariel is. Anyways, so
yeah,
I think the point, one part of the story, and I want to kind of put a level 2 on why suffer, is you went to a place where you kind of you said to yourself, okay, I've suffered enough. Why suffer more? And I think
yeah,
that tipping point was I think one of the biggest from the conversation that we're having today was a tipping point, right? It was like, okay, when did I realize that? Why do I need to suffer more? Can I not just quit now? If I'm going to suffer more, should I not put a halt to it? And I think too many people, like addiction, go down that suffering path and find comfort in that suffer. And I think you were very strong and courageous to say, hey, listen, I don't have the knowledge to everything. I need help. I think that
yeah. I
you
appreciate that.
demonstrated vulnerability and courage. And I think that, was there like a trigger moment when you're like, okay, this is it. This is it. This stops today. This is the trigger moment where you seeked help. Was there a trigger event?
Yeah, I think there were probably a couple, but there was one where I was dating my now wife, and I was like, it would be easier and I hadn't told anyone yet. Like I was seeking help, but I hadn't told
Mm-hmm.
anyone yet, and it wasn't getting better, right? I think you have this wish that, oh, I'm seeing a therapist, therefore like tomorrow I'm
Mm-hmm.
good, man. And
Oh yeah. That doesn't happen
yeah,
that way. Yeah.
yeah, you like leave and you're like, wait, so when I pay you, do I feel better? And I had this moment of like, it would just be, it would literally be better for everyone if I just like moved away, if I disappeared from everyone's life, than to like actually walk
Mm,
them through what I am going through. And I was so convicted in that I was like, that something, I think something jostled in me that, wait, that's not right. Like that can't be, even though it
mm,
feels it. And I remember my first meeting with Dr. Feaster. She's amazing. She's like opposite of me. She's like very clinical. Her office is in her like perfect, like mid-century modern designed home. Kind of very cold, and she's like 5'1", she's going through these questions, and I remember she got to a question and she asked, and I was like, no, I don't suffer from that. Like, no, not at all. She's like, well, let me explain what I mean. And when she gave the definition, I was like, yes. And it was the first time that I was like, wait, maybe this isn't just like I'm like like I'm beyond help. Like maybe this is like actually
Mm-hmm.
something that is easy and addressable. And I think it was in that moment where I had like real, not real, but tangible hope that I could like wrap my hands around for the
Mm-hmm.
first time. And um, that was enough to get me to the next spot. Because I remember the
Mm-hmm.
first thing she ever said to me, she's like, let me set goals. She's like, your goal right now is probably to be completely healed and to never feel this way again. She's like, that's not my goal. And I remember thinking like, that you're the wrong one for me. She's like, my goal is to get you on a playing field that's level. She's like, because right now you're standing at the bottom of a bunker with the expectation that you can see out above it, and it'll never work. You'll never see things level because you're not on level ground. She's like, my job is to get you to level ground. And I hated that goal. Like I remember like, that's a shitty goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then once she started explaining more and you build that trust, I'm like, oh, now I get it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you slowly start to get it. And so, yeah, I think that was the trigger moment. And then that was also then fortunately, followed by this moment of like, okay, I don't need to be perfectly cured right now. Like I can put an anchor into that, and that'll, that'll keep me there for a while. And hopefully I can get to the next waypoint. And yeah, I mean, it was a process, right? Like I said, all these years later, I still work with her. Of course, the nature of our conversations is different now, and
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, it's become over time a relationship that I just value so much. I owe her so much.
I'm wearing a T-shirt of the title of potentially my next book, which is "Embrace the Ox,"
Yeah, I
and
like that.
just I'll tell the story after, but it's just accepting who you are. And I think the biggest thing in life is when you realize what you are and what you're not,
Hmm.
and you get out of your head and you're kind to yourself. I I struggled a lot with just little things. I would eat my emotions continuously. And then I played rugby, so
Yeah,
the fat would disappear when I stopped doing that. Then when I
yeah,
stopped playing rugby, then the pounds started packing in, and even with
yeah,
CrossFit, and I've always been hard on myself. But at a certain point, just embrace the fact. And then I tried to become a visionary through work because I was liberated. We flip businesses for a living, and I'm good. I'm in a good spot right now where I don't have to work anymore. Or I should say that I still have to work, but I'm liberated from the day-to-day operations, and try to kind of take the the high road and the philanthropic road and all that stuff. And it's just no, I just love to work. I'm just an ox. I just love to plow and just embrace it. Don't think that you're somebody
yeah,
else. Just embrace who you are, and if you want to become better at it, but don't think that, hey, listen, oh, I wish for that, $300 million paycheck. That's never going to happen. And again, I'm not being
yeah.
pessimistic. I'm just being realistic. Right? You
Sure.
want to get through $300 million, you're gonna have to put a lot of suffering in your life to change from being an ox to a tiger, for example, right? You just can't
Right.
change that DNA the way you are. So, um, I want
Yeah,
to spend
I agree with
because
that.
you're. I want to spend a. Thank you very much. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about your business because just the fact that you are in the suit business in this casual world that we live in, it just intrigues me. Like, are people interested? Because I mean, you're going against the grain, right? We went from wearing suits and ties to just wearing T-shirts all the time through Zoom, and I just,
Yeah,
a well dressed man, regardless of age, sex, whatever inclination you have, there is nothing more handsome than a dude in a good suit. No matter how tall,
yeah, I
how
agree with that.
short, how fat, how skinny you are, there is nothing more handsome. Even if you're a guy and you're a heterosexual guy and you see this, you see like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, in a suit that's fitted, you go, damn, he's a handsome man,
Yeah.
right? And so I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
so. Tell us how
Yeah.
you fighting this fight against the t-shirt.
Yeah. It's a great question. So, COVID hits. Month before COVID hits, we had the best month of our uh, uh, history as a business. And COVID hits, and we literally and figuratively, our business is cut off, right? A couple months, none of our stores are open. And so the fight then to survive and pivot starts. And I actually can't stand the word pivot because it is overused
I
so
know.
much. But we didn't know what we'd have to shift to. We just knew there'd have to be a shift. And here's where I stand now. Big believer in pendulum swings as a matter of culture, as a matter of fashion,
Mm-hmm.
and we're in the middle of a pendulum swing. COVID took us all the way out to like the edges of casual and comfort. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we're starting to come back, and whenever the pendulum swings, it takes a little bit of where it was with it. And what we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing, this is actually a good example. So what I'm wearing, no shoulder pads. It has it's a cotton, but it has stretch
Mm-hmm.
material in it. Same with my shirt. And so I think that guys they still want to be comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but most men are now asking this question of what in the world do I wear to work now? And that's if work is a Zoom call or it's the corner office, and
Agreed.
nobody knows. And so pre-COVID, the days of the Navy suit. It's what I always say. Like, if you didn't know how to dress well, look at the best dressed guy in your office, and if you worked in a city like New York, as an example, where we started, you'd probably see, all right, the guy has a well-tailored suit. He's wearing a Ferragamo tie and Gucci loafers. Okay, I'm going to go buy a
Mm-hmm.
couple Ferragamo ties, Gucci loafers, and dark suits and a white shirt. Everyone looks great in that, and you can wear the same thing over and over again. What women have long been subjected to is like there's an expectation they don't wear the same thing twice, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to outfit plan every day. And men don't
Mm-hmm.
really have to do that. But now, with the traditional suit out of the wardrobe for the most part, um, oh, wow, I need a lot more pieces of clothing. And so,
Mm-hmm.
how are we fighting against it? We like to think of that our core customer is somewhere between the oldest Gen Z or the youngest millennial and kind of the youngest boomer. So that
Mm-hmm.
pretty broad range. Um, it's the average guy that either wants or needs to dress a little bit nicer than he has to. And
Mm-hmm.
so for that, it's not necessarily going to be the Navy suit. You're not going to see us selling a lot of Navy suits, but it is casual blazers. So blazers that are super
Mm-hmm.
easy to wear, materials that don't wrinkle,
Mm-hmm.
that you could throw on as easily with a polo shirt, with a t-shirt, with a button down. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, men have gotten so used to five pockets because of the increase in denim. We're now taking kind of traditional five pocket materials, and we'll still make them in a five pocket. I'm actually wearing five pockets now, but now we're taking that cotton twill stretch material that men are so used
Mm-hmm.
to in five pockets and making them in chinos, shorts, et cetera. And so we're not everything for everybody, but what we like to
Mm-hmm.
say is from 9 to 9, we have you covered. So from the minute you leave for work, minute you come home, and whether, like I said, whether work is the room next door or
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
corner office, and whether happy hour is with your buddies, or it's a rehearsal dinner or a wedding, it's really where we thrive. And we are we're men are naturally not imaginative as a whole when it comes to clothing, at least not yet. And so instead of just having, like, if you go into one of our showrooms or if you see us in Nordstrom, et cetera, like instead of just having clothes on a rack, we show looks, and
Mm-hmm.
how, so that you can say, oh, okay, this is what an unconstructed blazer and five pockets looks like. All right, this is how I can wear chinos with a sweater. And then on top of that, we've layered in this whole new tech platform that we are super excited about that's gaining a ton of traction called Alton Lane for You. And it came from, I mean, it sounds corny and cliche, but it came from a need-based moment during COVID of what if we can never touch and measure a customer again?
Hell
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, and so we partnered with this group out of the Bay Area, and it is a AR algorithmic based tool called Alton Lane for You. It's 3 questions: height, weight, body type, and it takes all of our almost 13, 14 years of fit data, and it takes their algorithm and it states, all right, if you're this height, weight, body type, this is the range of fits that you can fit into. You see it in 3D, you select your options, and it's delivered to you in 2 weeks. So that's where I think the future is. I don't think we'll ever get rid of the full, kind of traditional made to measure platform for the customer that wants it. But like classic cars, it's a niche market for a niche customer, and I think our main go forward is take this idea of polished casual dress, match it with the height of technology, make it super easy, and that's where we see the market going.
It's I was an early adopter, but it came to a price. So
Hmm.
back in the day, because I would travel often, Maxwell Clothier out of Hong Kong, they would tour,
Yeah,
and then I got a suit with them, and then I got a little bit
yeah,
disappointed. And then all my trips to Asia, I had a suit made or another one, but the one experience that never got away from me was Harry Rosen. So I don't know if you know Harry
no,
Rosen.
that I know it well.
Yeah, so
Canada's finest.
I spent a lot of money at Harry, but my jackets, early adopting, stretch material, I can crumple them
Yeah,
up and put them back on. I spent a lot of money on those things back then because
yeah,
it was kind of state
yeah.
of the art. That was the thing. I was traveling a lot, but
That's so cool.
the custom fit is really difficult to match. On the other hand, what I think you are on is I'd love to have another jacket. I'd love to do this, but then I look at my, wallet and I go, I'm not spending another $1,800 for a jacket. Well, what
Totally.
you're doing is offering that extra jacket for, I don't know, half the price, a third of the price, whatever it is,
Yeah.
at a very more reasonable price that will last and endure. I mean, I like these icy cotton shirts. I mean, the reason why we wear these t-shirts is because they're easy to maintain, and I tend to wear the same thing every single day, and it's just that's
Right.
how I function. So therefore, why would you not? But on the other hand, casual dressing is still casual dressing. There is
Yeah.
something to be said about wearing a jacket when you meet somebody face to face that
Yep.
just demonstrates a sign of respect, in my opinion.
Totally
Right?
agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Right? You
And
show up in shorts
in
and a
our
t-shirt. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say that it's a um uh you're never going to go wrong by wearing a blazer to a meeting with somebody, right? Like
Hmm.
it's always a safe bet. And your point on pricing is a really good one. And where we think the market tends to get it wrong. And look, luxury brands have to do this, but they tend to say, um, as you get older and as you make more money, your appetite for a higher price increases. So therefore, we're going to target higher and higher prices. The
Hmm.
reality is, I am more financially secure now than I was when I was 28, but I was a heck of a lot more willing at 28 to buy a $2,000 blazer than I am now with 3 kids. Right? You get that. You have 4 kids, and like once you have four, you might as well have 40. But like, um, but so it's up and down, right? And
Yeah.
so now once my kids get a little bit older and they, move out, then maybe my price appetite increases again. And that's really where what we love as a brand is that you can get the best $500 suit with us, I truly believe, on the market. And then we sell Vicuna, the rarest natural fiber in the world, and it's 40 grand. And like you can get
Oh
everything
shit.
in between. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But like, would anybody like? Does it turn you into Superman? No, it's just a
No.
it's cool. But our average price points are in that lower range,
Yeah.
not because it's lower quality, but we, you know, we do, yes, we make ready to wear for Nordstrom, Saks, and others, and but everything in our stores is custom, and so we don't have to worry about holding a whole bunch of stock. It's one customer at a time. We can price more fair to the customer, and it's a direct to consumer model. And so, yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. Guys go up, they then have a special wedding or event. They'll invest in something, or another guy might like for stuff he wears all day long. He's no problem spending $2,500 for a blazer or suit, but then he has some wedding he doesn't really want to go to, but he needs a black tux. Well, why spend a bunch of money if you never wear it and spend $500, right? And so we trust the customer's appetite, and we try to provide where he's most comfortable. And if you build trust and loyalty, and you're able to look at the long run of the customer, it's going to pay back in spades.
Oh, 100%. I have gone back to Harry Rosen. They know my name. I walk into any store. Mr. Hunter, how are you today? What can
That's
we
so
help you
cool.
with? I had a pair of trousers that the wool kind of broke between the legs. They replaced them, no problem. But again, the price point, I could afford that, but I believe that you are in a better position because a custom made suit, there's nothing that fits like it and more comfortable to wear.
Yeah,
And no
that's
matter
right.
how much guys you think you don't care how good you look, when you put a good blazer on, you feel like Superman. You feel cool. You feel you're rocking
Yeah.
it. I agree.
Yeah.
Except when in
Yeah.
Florida, when they wear the jackets and shorts and loafers, open loafers, I can't do it, man. Sorry for all my
Yeah.
Floridian friends. I can't do it. I can't do that Miami Vice
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. No, that's all right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you went back to all your Canadian buddies, they would give you all sorts of hell if you ever tried to pull that off.
Oh yeah,
My
yeah, yeah.
my oldest brother worked in Boston for years, and a couple years, and before that New York. And one of the guys that he worked with in those different stops is Canadian, and Virginia, Richmond, Virginia is about as non-Canadian as it gets. And so he's from Calgary.
Mm.
Played college hockey at Brown. But a bunch of his buddies ended up going into the NHL, and they were kind of journeymen to I think one guy was an all-star, had a couple Stanley Cup rings. Anyway, they would go on this like annual guys trip, and they one year finally invited my brother, and he was basically like the only non-hockey Canadian on the trip. And so one of the guys had just won the Stanley Cup on the trip, had won a bunch, obviously had gotten a bunch of money, had gotten a Stanley Cup bonus, and they go out to this big old dinner to celebrate, and they're all giving him all sorts of flack for being like Southern, wearing like loafers without socks. And it was amazing. So I don't remember the bill, but it was probably, I don't know, 15 guys, like, a super
Big
fancy
bill.
steak dinner, and huge bill, right? And so my brother has always been fairly frugal, and was not making anywhere near what these guys were. And they played this huge joke on him where they did credit card roulette. My brother was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, no, you have to, Howard. Like, it's 1 in 15 chance. So they rigged it with the waitress where she pulled his card at the last.
Oh my!
And but the NHL guy had already paid for the whole dinner.
Oh shit!
And these Canadian guys tell this story of my brother's face, like basically completely melting off, wanting to die. But this is the first time in front of these like Canadians. He feels the need to like hold it together for American pride. And then he finally opens it up, and it was like, F you, dude, we got you.
Yeah. I mean, I've played a lifetime of rugby, and I mean, for us, what I like about where you're at and where rugby has always been about the post game wearing proper jacket and tie. So there's still,
yeah, sure,
it's still very much I'll say, to be inclusive, it's a gentleman's game, but what it means by that is that once you're done, it is a mature, elegant,
Yeah, I get that.
men and women dress back up, and some of the girls clean up really well as well, from bruises and everything to ponytails
For
and
sure.
crazy hair and bruises to fine, eloquent women. So that I truly appreciate getting dressed up and celebrating, both with the t-shirt on the pitch, but actually dressing up. I think there's
Yeah, I agree with that.
not enough formalities. And I think that we need more of you. We need more of Alton Lane in the world, and
Well, I appreciate that.
learning to eat properly with the proper spoon and wear the proper. Last question, Peyton, before this conversation has been great. Look at that. The time's just flown by. Book of choice. What is the resource of choice? Something that you live by. So for me, for example, I'm an advocate when it comes time to leadership about Master and Commander, the moving by Russell Crowe on a ship, and just men must be led, right? So people must be led. Leadership is critical to the survival of any entity, and you have to accept leadership. And there's so many, strong narratives in there that can be applied. So what is yours? What's your movie, your book, something that you rely on, you go back to when it comes time to business or anything else?
Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, shit. I was going to say, okay, you got to connect the dots on this one, Peyton, because I am not.
No, that
was a good one. Thanks.
No, so I'm actually almost finished with a book right now by John Meacham, and it's on John Lewis and his impact in the civil rights movement, and especially on the freedom rides throughout the South. And it has been I told my wife 2 nights ago, I said, I know you don't love this type of genre, but there's just so much rich truth in it. And it has this truth of the idea of like consistent leadership is so key. And they had a very unique style of leadership. And you look back and it talks about like how passive and congenial and nonviolent people like John Lewis and Martin Luther King were. But what it gets to is that beneath the surface, they had this like natural rage about what was happening, but they refined each other. And within the power of that community, they learned the best path forward. And there are so many moments where, had they been left to their own vices, they would have acted in ways that probably would have been detrimental to the ultimate movement. And it's just been this lesson for me that despite whatever I'm suffering, despite whatever's going through, compared to what they went through, I got it pretty darn good, man. Let me keep that in focus. 2, growth without suffering is, I think, impossible, but growth without community, kind of consistent growth, is really hard. And so it's been this reminder for me that community doesn't have to be 100 people strong, but you need a tight knit group of people that are willing to hold you to account, and that you allow them to call you out, and that together you can refine each other to, something that is greater than you're capable of yourself. And so it's just been this, I love to read, but they're not too many seminal books that I've read that I'm like, that's one that I will continue coming back to. And it 100% is for me.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Peyton, for being on the show. What a lovely conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, this was great. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, and love chatting with you.
Fabulous. Thank you. With that being said, my name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate vision into frontline operations. Please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you can know when the next episode is coming out. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.